Just try registering for a course of this at MSU. You're booked. You won't be able to register for it a year out. And I know that personally because my own son tried to register for a course and it was booked out for a year. So I'm here to introduce to you the gem that we talked about, Professor Mohammad Hassan Khalil. He's a professor of religious studies, an adjunct professor of law, and the director of Muslim Studies program at Michigan State University. Before returning to his hometown of East Lansing, Michigan, he was an assistant professor of religion and visiting professor of law at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He specializes in Islamic thought and is an author of 2 books, Islam and the Faith of Others, The Separation Question with Oxford University Press, and Jihad, Radicalism, and the New Atheism with Cambridge University Press. He is also the editor of 2 books, Between Heaven and Hell, Islam's Salvation and the Fate of Others with Oxford University Press, and Muslims and Youth Politics Today, A Defining Moment, and by ILEX and Harvard University Press. A few years ago, he was the lead investigator of the Muslims of the Midwest Digital Archive at Michigan State University. And in 2015, he received the MSU Teacher Scholar Award. Outside of the university, he has been a member of the school committee of the Greater Lansing Islamic School. And truly, he's been such a valuable member of our community, and it's very humbling to see how we saw him as a Sunday school student at our Islamic Center, and now he goes on to raise a family and be such a distinguished professor at Michigan State University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mohammad Hassan Khalil.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. In the name of God, Allah in Arabic, all praise is due to God. Many thanks to my dear brother from another mother, Tahsin Sardar, for that very generous introduction. Many thanks also to our hosts, our mayors, Mayor Shore, Mayor Bacon, our Master of Ceremonies, Dr. Farhan Bhatti, the City of Lansing office manager who graciously answered all my questions about tonight's event, Don Karowitz, the folks doing IT, including Jeremy and Jared, and all the organizers and every single person involved in this important event. I'm actually going to start by taking us back to the 1950s. The renowned Oxford linguistic philosopher J.L. Austin, a big shot, was invited to give a public lecture at Columbia University. He began by boldly and confidently declaring, without qualification, that although a double negative in English implies a positive meaning, like if you say, I will not play, that means what? I will play. So Professor Austin claimed that although a double negative in English implies a positive meaning, there is no language on this planet in which a double positive implies a negative meaning. To this, the American philosopher Sidney Morgenbesser sarcastically responded, yeah. Thereby seemingly undermining the entire lecture from the very beginning. According to another account, he responded, yeah, right. Now, you could argue that was a cheap shot, but this anecdote and others like it teach us to temper some of our claims. And this evening, I'm not going to make any major claims. Instead, please consider what I say this evening to be a gentle reminder to us all, myself included. So with that out of the way, I will really begin. Many of us know the opening words of the preamble to the U.S. Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form what? A more perfect union. And then it goes on. Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and so on. But I'm stuck on a more perfect union. Now, I consider myself an optimist, but folks, I don't have to tell you that we're facing many challenges in this country today. Challenges that, left unresolved, can undermine any notion of a perfect union. And this evening, I'd like for us all to reflect on one of these challenges, and it is one that was exacerbated by the pandemic, and that is the problem of food insecurity. Our nation is the wealthiest on the planet by net worth. And yet, according to a USDA report from September, over 34 million of our fellow Americans are food insecure. They don't have reliable access to safe, healthy food. Over 34 million. As a point of comparison, the entire population of Michigan is around 10 million. Again, over 34 million, over 10% of the US population is food insecure, and of those 34 million, 9 million are children. And by the way, there are other reports that place the number much higher. In our state, roughly 1.2 million Michiganders are food insecure. That's 1 out of every 9 Michiganders. And among our children here in Michigan, 1 out of 7 are food insecure. Say that again. 1 out of 7 of our children are food insecure. In mid-Michigan, it was reported in the fall that roughly 94,000 of our neighbors face food insecurity. Of the 94,000, close to 20,000 are children. And now with federal assistance programs coming to an end, the Greater Lansing Food Bank is seeing a major increase in demand for help. This is happening right here. This is our reality. And again, all this is occurring in the wealthiest nation on the planet. Now, on the surface, if someone had no idea about our history, the fact that this problem would even exist in our country might seem perplexing. After all, although we are a people of many religions and ideologies, one of the common features of these religions and ideologies is a notion of caring for others and helping them as best we can. Indeed, there are numerous secular ideologies and institutions that champion giving and sharing. In Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, there's a concept called dana, which is the practice of being generous, often by giving to those in need and distress. And we find similar concepts in the religions that honor Abraham, peace be upon him. In the Torah of the Hebrew Bible, Moses, peace be upon him, is commanded by God to give to those in need some of the harvest of the land. And Moses instructs his people to give generously and to do so without a grudging heart. In the New Testament, Jesus, peace be upon him, teaches that it is more blessed to give than to receive. And he repeatedly instructs his followers to give and to share. And in the Islamic holy book, the Quran, we find, first of all, passages presenting Moses and Jesus as important prophets of God, peace be upon them both. We also find in the Quran numerous exhortations to give to those in need, with many passages praising those who give and rebuking those who are miserly and refuse to give. And in a prophetic tradition or hadith that is widely considered authentic, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is quoted as saying that if one eats their full while their neighbor goes hungry, then that person is not truly a believer. In short, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and all the better if you take into account the different needs of one another. So, one might ask, how could it be that so many of our fellow Americans are food insecure when today we, the people, comprise many diverse groups that affirm and even celebrate the virtue of giving and sharing? Now, I'm not a politician, not a sociologist, and I'm sure as heck not an economist. But I know enough to know that there are systemic problems causing what we see today. I also know that we can't sit around and wait for these systemic problems to be addressed and redressed. If my own daughters were in need, I would do everything in my ability to help them right now, this instant. I wouldn't wait. I couldn't wait. So I'd like to challenge all of us, myself included, to do better, to do more, and to feel a sense of urgency when it comes to our neighbors who are food insecure. And if you need some motivation, if you're looking for role models, you don't have to look very far. Some of the organizers of this very event are individuals who are devoted to helping their neighbors. Of course, you have public servants, like our hosts for this event. You have Michelle Lance and the leadership of the Greater Lansing Food Bank. You have the organizers. Oh, I have to show a picture of the Greater Lansing Food Bank, yes. In action. You have the organizers of the fairly recent Kids Against Hunger campaign, involving individuals from the University Lutheran Church, the Islamic Center of East Lansing, and Michigan State University. And by the way, I only recently realized my beloved wife Suzanne is in this. You also have the physicians who go out of their way to provide critical medical care to those who would not otherwise be able to access that care. Dr. Farhan Bhatti is a great example. You have the selfless volunteers who have devoted their lives to serving others, not expecting anything in return. Tahsin Sarda, the one person who was just standing here. You have the clergy like Imam Suhail. And the list goes on. I want to add one more name, one more person to look at, to consider. And that is an individual named Mahdi Sissoko. If you're into college basketball, and by the way, I heard there's a rumor that Jeremy Langford is here. Is that true? Yeah, I think it's true, yeah. But if you're into college basketball, you may recognize the name Mahdi Sissoko. He's the starting center for the MSU basketball team. He really wanted to be here this evening, but he's got a work group for an end of semester project, so he couldn't make it. But he really wanted to be here. And while watching Mahdi dunk and block is fun, there's actually something truly inspirational about him. And you don't have to be a basketball fan to appreciate it. Here is a young man who is originally from Bafulabe, a village in Mali that has no running water, or has had no running water. I'll tell you about something that just happened. Has had no running water, no electricity. When Mahdi went to school, he literally walked an hour without shoes. Now, you may know that college athletes today can earn money. Well, Mahdi is donating every single dollar he receives to support his village, to support his longtime neighbors. He created the Mahdi Sissoko Foundation, and as we speak, the foundation is building a school in his village. The school has running water, and it has electricity, and it has 2 clinics attached to it. This is all happening through the good intentions of one person, and this one person is inspiring and positively impacting many others. This is what Mahdi is doing to help his longtime neighbors. He's giving it his all. Now, we're all different. We have different capabilities. But let's reflect on what we are doing or not doing to help our many neighbors. If we're not necessarily giving it our all, are we at least seriously trying to help? I told you that if my own daughters were in need, I would do everything in my ability to help them, and help them right now, this instant. But what about those who are not part of my family? I may not feel that sense of urgency. But if I got to know them, I almost certainly would feel at least some urgency. And this, to my mind, is one of the great challenges we face. It may not seem we have much in common with at least some of our neighbors. For instance, we may see the world very differently. To one another, we may seem like the other, the mysterious other. And so there's a proverbial barrier between us. This concept of otherness, of seeing certain people as the distinct other, is central to my own research. Otherness is the basis for all my work, and it's something that has fascinated me for as long as I can remember. And for me, this is personal. I was born down the street, Sparrow Hospital. I'm the child of Egyptian Muslim immigrants. I got my parents here. I attended East Lansing Public Schools at a time when its student body was not nearly as diverse as it is today. I remember as an elementary school student, in my grade, I was the only Muslim and only person with Egyptian roots, being called weird because of my name, because of the lunch my family packed for me. It was a little weird. With all due respect, love you guys. And yet, over time, I made friends at school, and not before, notwithstanding my uniqueness, I felt like I belonged. Flash forward to the early 2000s, when some of the people I considered friends began to treat me and my family differently. In some people's eyes, we were not just the other, but potential enemies. And although at the time I was a dental student at the University of Michigan, I felt compelled to talk and write about my religion, the religion that was now under the spotlight, and this eventually led me to quit dental school altogether and pursue my real passion, religious studies. Today, I devote a lot of time to combating stereotypes and misconceptions in the hope that we can collectively arrive at a more honest and more reasonable understanding of one another. We're not all the same. But, to quote the late Maya Angelou, I note the obvious differences between each sort and type, but we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike than we are unalike. And we can break down, that's the end of the poem, we can break down some of the proverbial barriers between us if we're able to recognize our shared humanity and indeed our shared history. In the case of U.S. Muslims, I want my fellow Americans and my fellow Muslims to appreciate the fact that Muslims have a rich history in this country. Muslims have long been part of the American fabric. Hundreds of years ago, countless African Muslims were enslaved and forcibly transported to the shores of this country. We don't know what percentage of enslaved Africans were Muslim, but we know there were many. And they included people like the individual pictured here, Omar ibn Said. Omar ibn Said was a scholar from West Africa, who was enslaved and eventually became a well-known figure in his lifetime. When we look at the names of soldiers who fought with George Washington in the Revolutionary War, we see names like Yusuf bin Ali and Benpet Muhammad. In the 1800s, many Muslims began migrating to this country, and we begin to see prominent converts like the writer and American consul to the Philippines, Alexander Russell Webb. And Webb was so influential that he found an audience with many, including, incidentally, Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain. In fact, in his novel Tom Sawyer Abroad, Twain seems to make an inside joke with Webb by referring to Missouri Muslims, or Muslims, Missouri Muslims. Webb was from Missouri. In the 1900s, we see more immigration and the establishment of numerous mosques, including the 1921 Highland Park Mosque here in Michigan, a mosque that no longer exists, but we still have copies of their newsletter, as well as the so-called Mother Mosque of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which does still exist. And here's an image of the early congregation. We also see in the 1900s even more prominent converts, like Lansing's own Malcolm X, Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. I plan to say more about him in a moment. He who floats like a butterfly and stings like a bee, the peerless Muhammad Ali. And no, this is not a pilot named Roger Murdoch. This is the captain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And the list goes on. These are people who played an important role in shaping American culture. And by the way, just a historical tidbit, a fun fact. You know that song that's played at probably most American weddings, Celebration? Celebrate good times, come on. Well, the song is by Kool and the Gang, right. Kool and the Gang, right. Well, the lead singer, Kool, or Robert Bell, or Muhammad Bayan, is Muslim. And so was his brother, who passed away a few years ago, the late Ronald Bell, or Khalis Bayan. And Khalis, or Ronald Bell, is the one who wrote Celebration. And he wrote it after reading a translation of the Quran. And if you don't believe me, I get it. And I thought, this is fake news. There is no way. Let me go to Snopes, let me look it up. I encourage you, please look it up. This is actually how Ronald himself describes how he wrote the song, Celebration. He says, the initial idea for the song came from the Quran I was reading. I was reading the passage where God was creating Adam, and the angels were celebrating and singing praises. That inspired me to write the basic chords. The line, everyone around the world, come on. I'm a really bad singer, but Celebration, right? So that's how he got the idea. That's how it all started. And then as he continued writing, the song took, shall we say, another direction. And that's how it began. Just a fun fact. Today, there are numerous mosques and Muslim institutions, including right here in Michigan. And there are millions of U.S. Muslims, possibly the most diverse population of Muslims on the planet. Possibly. And these are individuals who are contributing to society in just about every way and in just about every profession. Why is this information so important? Well, I'll tell you why using an extreme example. Just a few years ago, an organization called American Vanguard, or Vanguard America, both names are used, created this poster, which appeared on numerous college campuses throughout the country. And the message was, imagine a Muslim-free America. And in the background, you could see an image of the World Trade Center. The message was obvious. Those Muslims, those others, have ruined things for us here in America. Needless to say, this demonstrates bigotry. But it also demonstrates profound ignorance. It demonstrates ignorance of the critical historical role played by enslaved Muslims in establishing our country. And it demonstrates ignorance of the many modern contributions of U.S. Muslims. And in this case, it even demonstrates ignorance about the World Trade Center itself. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it was a Muslim who designed the World Trade Center. It was not. It was not. But what I will tell you is that the framed tube design that was used to make the World Trade Center, that was by a Muslim. And I'm here referring to the famous structural engineer, Fazlur Rahman Khan. Khan was originally from Bangladesh, and he moved to the US and would eventually be considered the Einstein of structural engineering. Now, in addition to coming up with the framed tube design, he he himself did design the Sears Tower, also known as, we're now called Willis Tower, but we were all going to call it Sears Tower, in Chicago, the John Hancock Center in Chicago, and outside the U.S., the Hajj Terminal at the Jeddah Airport for people performing the pilgrimage to Mecca. So pretty Muslim-y. So now, if we go back to the poster, it's easy to appreciate just how absurd it is. And this is precisely what happens when people fall into the trap of intellectual laziness, when people begin to imagine others in simplistic ways. And I cannot help but think that the people who designed this poster had minimal, if any, meaningful interactions with Muslims. Indeed, meaningful interactions go a long way. Polls show that those who interact with Muslims are more likely to have a positive view of them. And the same surely applies for how Muslims view those who are not Muslim. And this, of course, applies not just to religion, but to other things as well. Malcolm X, Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, revised some of his views on race when he interacted with a wide variety of people during his travels overseas, including his Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca. As he wrote in his famous letter from Mecca, during the past 11 days, here in the Muslim world, I have eaten from the same plate, drunk from the same glass, slept on the same rug, while praying to the same God, with fellow Muslims whose eyes were the bluest of blue, whose hair was the blondest of blonde, and whose skin was the whitest of white. And in the words and in the deeds of the white Muslims, I felt the same sincerity that I felt among the black African Muslims of Nigeria, Sudan, and Ghana. Malcolm X, of course, continued to be very critical of racial injustice, but he was able to do so while adopting a more inclusive racial vision. And this was precisely because of his meaningful interactions with others. Now, let's extend this logic to food insecurity. If we don't feel a sense of urgency when it comes to the problem of food insecurity among our neighbors, our fellow Michiganders, many of whom are children, then let us challenge ourselves. Let's challenge ourselves to reach out to others, to reach across the proverbial aisle, to break down some of the barriers that separate us, and to have as many meaningful interactions as we can, so that when there's a need for a helping hand, we will be not just ready, but eager to offer it. And here, I'm reminded of a beautiful passage of the Quran that states that God made humanity into races and tribes so that you may come to know one another. So that you may come to know one another. I'll conclude with this. We are gathered here this evening for an event that celebrates Ramadan, the month of fasting, which recently concluded. And Mayors Ramadan did an excellent job presenting an overview of Ramadan. The Quran states, "You who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may be mindful of God." In a way, fasting connects Muslims to others. How so? Well, first of all, most of the world's major religions have some kind of fast. And so by fasting, Muslims partake in a ritual that is familiar to others in a general sense, even if the details are quite different. Many people don't know this, but Moses, peace be upon him, is actually the most often mentioned human name in the Quran. Moses is a hero in the Quran. By fasting, Muslims follow in the footsteps of someone who is the Bible's first recorded faster. As we read in the Torah of the Hebrew Bible, Moses, peace be upon him, abstained from food and drink for 40 days, followed by another 40 days. By making a connection, however tenuous, with members of other religious traditions, and feeling just some, of the hunger and thirst felt by people of every race and ethnicity, living in every region of the world, we find that Ramadan is a time for reflecting on our collective humanity. And maybe, just maybe, we can reach a point where we can develop a meaningful connection, not just to people who are like us or who live near us, but also the hundreds of millions of our fellow human beings around the world who are facing food insecurity. What is more, if we can condition ourselves to see some of the self in the other, then we will also surely contribute to spreading peace. And to paraphrase a famous prophetic report or hadith that is widely considered authentic, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, stated, "Shall I not inform you of something better in degree than fasting, praying, and almsgiving? Making peace between one another." Peace be upon you all. Thank you.
How about